Some moments change your life in the space of a heartbeat. For me, it was the sound of gravel crunching under truck tires on a Tuesday afternoon in late June when I thought I'd be alone for another week. I was 24 years old, fresh out of a marketing job that had squeezed every ounce of creativity from my soul and desperately trying to figure out what came next. House sitting for my college friend Mason seemed like the perfect escape. 2 weeks in rural Montana, nothing but mountains, silence, and space to breathe. I wasn't expecting his father to come home early. And I definitely wasn't expecting James Holloway to look the way he did when he stepped out of that dusty F-150. The Holloway Ranch sat nestled in a valley where the mountains seemed to cradle the earth itself. I'd arrived 3 days earlier, my sedan looking comically out of place next to the barn and riding equipment scattered across the property. Mason had been apologetic on the phone, explaining that a work opportunity in Seattle had come up suddenly, but he trusted me completely with the house. His dad was away at a cattle auction in Wyoming and wouldn't be back until next week. "Make yourself at home, Danny," Mason had said. "Seriously, raid the fridge, use the hot tub, whatever, you need this break." He wasn't wrong. After 2 years of 60-hour weeks in a glass tower in Denver, pushing products I didn't believe in to people who didn't need them, I'd hit a wall. My boss had called me unmotivated during my exit interview. I'd called it finding my humanity again. The ranch was everything I needed. Mornings, I'd wake to birdsong instead of traffic. I discovered a love for cooking actual meals instead of microwaving sad desk lunches. I'd even tried my hand at sketching the mountain views, something I hadn't done since college when dreams still felt possible. On that Tuesday afternoon, I was in the kitchen experimenting with sourdough when I heard it. The distinctive rumble of a truck engine growing louder as it approached down the long driveway. My stomach dropped. Had I misunderstood Mason's timeline? Was someone else supposed to be here? I wiped flour from my hands and walked to the front window, pulling back the gingham curtain just as the truck came into view. It was a working vehicle, not a showpiece, mud-splattered with a dented bumper and a horse trailer rattling behind it. The engine cut off, the driver's door opened. And then I saw him. James Holloway was 52 years old, according to the brief mentions Mason had made over the years. But as he stepped down from the truck, removing his worn Stetson to wipe sweat from his brow, age seemed like just a number that had no bearing on the reality before me. He was tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his faded denim shirt in a way that suggested genuine strength, not gym vanity. His jeans were dusty, fitted just right, held up by a leather belt with a simple silver buckle. Dark hair shot through with distinguished silver, a jawline that could cut glass. And even from a distance, I could see the weathered tan of someone who'd spent his life under open skis. But it was the way he moved that caught me, purposeful, grounded, like a man who knew exactly who he was and had no need to prove it to anyone. I realized I was starring when he looked directly at the window. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before I jerked away from the curtain, heart hammering. "Smooth, Danny, real smooth." I forced myself to walk to the front door like a normal person who definitely hadn't just been caught gawking. By the time I opened it, James was halfway up the porch steps, his expression somewhere between confused and cautious. "Help you?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in my chest. "Hi, yes, I'm Danny, Daniel Torres. I'm house-sitting for Mason." The words tumbled out too fast. "He didn't mention you'd be back early." Understanding dawned in his eyes that were a striking blue-gray like storm clouds over the mountains. "Mason didn't tell you I was coming. He said you'd be gone until next week." James sighed, setting down the duffel bag he'd been carrying. "Auction ended early, didn't get what I was hopping for, so I decided to head back." He studied me for a moment and I felt inexplicably exposed under that gaze. "Mason mentioned he had a friend staying, didn't realize that was happening this week." "I can leave." "No need," he waved away the suggestion. "House is big enough for both of us, long as you don't mind sharing space with an old cowboy who's not much for conversation." Old, the word felt absurd applied to him. "I don't mind at all, I've been pretty quiet anyway." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Mason said you needed a break from the city." "Something like that." "Well," James picked up his bag again. "I'll try not to disturb your peace, just need to get cleaned up and check on a few things around the property." He moved past me, bringing with him the scent of leather, hay, and something indefinably masculine that made my pulse quicken. As he disappeared into the house, I stood on the porch, trying to process what had just happened. I'd been around attractive men before. I'd dated in college, had a brief relationship in Denver that ended amicably when we both realized we wanted different things. I understood attraction, recognized it when it appeared. But this felt different. This felt like standing too close to a wildfire. That evening I made dinner for two without really planning to. It seemed rude to cook only for myself when James was in the house, and besides I'd already started marinating chicken before he'd arrived. When he came downstairs after his shower, hair damp, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans that somehow looked better than any designer outfit I'd ever seen, I was plating grilled chicken with roasted vegetables and a salad. "You didn't have to do that," he said, but his tone was appreciative. I'd already started cooking, seemed silly not to make enough for both of us. We ate at the kitchen table and the silence that settled between us wasn't awkward exactly, but it was weighted, charged. I found myself hyper-aware of every movement he made, the way he held his fork, the flex of his forearms, the slight smile when he tasted the food. "This is good," James said. "Really good. Mason never mentioned you could cook." Mason's only seen me eat ramen and energy bars during finals week. I've learned a few things since then. "What made you leave Denver?" The question was casual, but his eyes were attentive. I considered deflecting, but something about James invited honesty. "I was working in marketing and I was miserable, woke up one day and couldn't remember the last time I'd done something that mattered, so I quit." That take courage. Or stupidity, the jury's still out. "Courage," James repeated firmly. "Most people stay in situations that make them miserable because they're afraid of the unknown. Takes guts to walk away." Sounds like you're speaking from experience. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, in a manner of speaking. The conversation drifted to safer topics, the ranch, the land, the rhythms of rural life so different from what I'd known. James spoke about his work with a quiet passion that was compelling. He wasn't flashy or boastful, but when he described a difficult calving or the satisfaction of breeding quality horses, his whole demeanor softened. I could have listened to him talk for hours. After dinner, James insisted on cleaning up while I protested. We compromised. I washed, he dried. Standing side by side at the sink, our hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water, I felt that charge in the air intensify. "Your friend Mason," James said suddenly, "he tell you much about me?" "Not really. I know you've been running this ranch for a long time, that you're a good father." "He say anything else?" There was something underneath the question, something I couldn't quite identify. Should he have? James was quiet for a moment, methodically drying a plate. "I was married, Mason's mother. She passed away 6 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Cancer, quick and cruel." He set down the plate. "Before that we weren't happy. Hadn't been for a long time, but we stayed together for Mason, for the ranch, for appearances." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. "After she died, I had to do a lot of thinking about who I was, who I'd been pretending to be." He turned to look at me then, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "Mason knows. It wasn't easy telling him, but he deserved the truth. He's been understanding." My heart was pounding. What truth? "I think you know Danny." The air between us seemed to crackle. I did know, had known maybe from the moment our eyes met through the window. Recognition calls to recognition. "I'm gay," I said quietly, "if that's what you're asking." "I know," a slight smile. "Mason might have mentioned that too." "And you?" James took a breath. "Took me 50 years to say it out loud, to admit what I'd been burying my whole life. But yeah, I am." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability, made something crack open in my chest. Here was a man who'd spent decades living a lie, performing a role, denying himself, and he'd finally found the courage to speak his truth. "That must have been incredibly hard," I said. "Hardest thing I've ever done and the most necessary." He paused. "Coming out in rural Montana at my age, it's not exactly a parade. Lost some friends. Certain folks in town won't look me in the eye anymore, but I sleep better at night than I have in 30 years. I'm glad you found yourself." "Still finding," he corrected, "every day." We stood there, dishes forgotten, just looking at each other. The kitchen light cast warm shadows across his face, highlighting the silver in his hair, the lines earned by years of sun and hard work. He was beautiful in a way I'd never encountered, rugged, real, imperfectly perfect. Danny, my name in his voice sent shivers down my spine. I should tell you, I'm not good at this, dadding, being open about what I want. I've got decades of hiding to unlearn. What do you want? The question hung between us. James stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. You're young, you're my son's friend, you're here for peace and quiet, not to deal with a confused middle-aged man who doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I'm 24, not a child, and you don't seem confused to me. Danny. What do you want, James? He exhaled slowly. I want to kiss you, have wanted to since I saw you in that window looking at me like I was something worth looking at. My pulse was racing. What's stopping you? Common sense, decency, the fact that this is complicated as hell. Or, I said, surprised by my own boldness, maybe we're both adults who deserve to follow what feels right for once. For a long moment, James didn't move. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my jaw, rough and warm. You feel right, he murmured, that's what scares me. I leaned into his touch. Scare me too, then. This time when he said my name, it was barely a whisper, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might disappear. But when I pressed closer, my hands finding the solid warmth of his chest, something in him seemed to unlock. He kissed me deeper, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other settling on my waist, pulling me against him. It felt like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against mine. This is a terrible idea, he said. Probably. You're leaving in a week and a half. I know. And you're Mason's friend. I am. We should stop this before it goes further. I looked up at him. Do you want to stop? His answer was another kiss, this one more urgent, more certain. We stumbled backward until my back hit the counter and James's hands were in my hair and I was drowning in the taste of him, the feel of him, the overwhelming rightness of it all. When we finally came up for air, I was trembling. Upstairs, James said roughly, we should talk, really talk about what this means. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He took my hand, such a simple gesture but loaded with meaning, and led me up the stairs to the living room. We sat on the couch, not quite touching, both of us trying to catch our breath and our thoughts. I haven't done this in a long time, James admitted. Haven't let myself feel this in, maybe ever, not like this. What does it feel like? Terrifying, exhilarating. He turned to me, real. I understood. Every relationship I'd had before had felt like I was holding something back, playing a part. With James, even in these few hours, I felt seen in a way I never had before. I don't know what happens here, I said honestly. I don't know how to navigate this. Neither do I. James took my hand again, threading our fingers together. But maybe we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Maybe we just see where this goes, honestly. No expectations, no promises beyond treating each other with respect and care. I can do that. Even knowing it might hurt when you leave. The question sobered me because he was right. I was leaving. Back to Denver, back to figuring out my life. This thing between us had an expiration date built in. But when I looked at James, at the hope and fear mingled in his expression, I knew I couldn't walk away. Not yet. Even knowing that, I said. We talked until late into the night, sharing stories, trading vulnerabilities. James told me about his marriage, about the quiet desperation of loving someone while knowing you could never fully be yourself with them. About the guilt and relief he'd felt when his wife passed, and the shame he still carried over feeling relieved. About coming out to Mason, expecting rejection and finding acceptance instead. I told him about growing up as the only gay kid I knew in my Texas high school, about finding community in college, about the ways I'd learned to hide parts of myself even in supposedly liberal spaces, about the hollow feeling of success without purpose. By the time we finally stood to go to our separate bedrooms, I felt like I'd known James for years instead of hours. At my door he kissed me again, soft and sweet. Good night, Danny. Good night, James. I lay awake for a long time, my lips still tingling, my heart full of something I was afraid to name. Morning came too early and not soon enough. I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, I wondered if I'd dreamed the entire previous evening, but no, my lips still felt swollen from James's kisses and my chest still held that fluttery, uncertain feeling. I dressed and headed downstairs, finding James at the stove making eggs and bacon. He looked up when I entered and the smile that crossed his face was shy and genuine. "Morning," he said, "hope I didn't wake you." "You didn't, this smells amazing." We ate breakfast together, stealing glances, finding excuses to brush hands. The attraction was still there, undeniable but layered now with something deeper. Knowledge, connection. After breakfast, James had work to do, fence repairs in the north pasture, checking on the horses, a dozen other tasks that came with running a ranch. I expected him to disappear for the day, but instead he asked, "Wanna come with me? Might be nice to have company, and I can show you more of the property." I agreed immediately. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt both brand new and strangely familiar. Mornings, we'd have breakfast together, talking about everything and nothing. Then James would work and I'd follow along, learning about ranch life, helping where I could. He was patient with my city boy ignorance, amused by my questions, genuinely pleased when I managed to help successfully. "You're stronger than you look," he said one afternoon as I helped him haul hay bales into the barn. I was sweating, muscles aching, but I felt more alive than I had in months. "You calling me scrawny? I'm calling you full of surprises." The physical labor was satisfying in a way my office job had never been. I could see the results of my work immediately: a repaired fence, fed horses, a cleared path. No metrics, no performance reviews, just tangible accomplishment. But more than the work, it was James himself who captivated me. I learned that he was an early riser who loved the quiet of dawn, that he took his coffee black but secretly had a sweet tooth for homemade pie. That he was fiercely protective of the land and animals in his care, that he had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on you. That he was more well-read than he let on, with a collection of poetry books hidden in his bedroom. "Surprised?" he asked when he caught me looking at them. "Pleasantly. Cowboys can read, you know." I'm learning that cowboys can be full of surprises too. Evenings, we'd make dinner together, a partnership that felt natural, moving around each other in the kitchen like we'd been doing it for years. We'd eat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in impossible colors. And afterward, we'd end up on the couch or the porch swing, talking until the stars came out. Sometimes we'd kiss, slow and deep, exploring each other with increasing familiarity. But we hadn't gone further than that. Both of us seeming to understand that rushing would cheapen what was building between us. "Tell me about your dreams," James said one night, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest. "Not what you think you should want, what you actually dream about." I was quiet, thinking, I want to create things that matter, art maybe, or writing, something that connects people, makes them feel less alone. "Why marketing then?" "Because it was practical, because I was good at it, because I was afraid of failing at what I actually wanted. And now I'm terrified and hopeful at the same time." James pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "That's how you know you're on the right path." "What about you? What are your dreams?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, "I dream about being fully myself, about not having to hide or explain or justify, about finding someone who sees all of me, the good and the damaged and the still figuring it out parts, and wants to stay anyway." My throat tightened. "James, I'm not saying that to put pressure on you," he added quickly. "I know this is temporary, I want you to know that being with you these past few days has felt like a glimpse of that dream, like maybe it's possible." I tilted my head back to look at him. In the porch light, his features were softer, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. "It's possible," I whispered. "You deserve that." He kissed me then, tender and aching, and I felt the weight of everything unsaid between us. On the fifth day, James had to go into town for supplies. I offered to stay back, not wanting to intrude, but he shook his head. "Come with me unless you're sick of my company." "Not even close." The drive into town took 40 minutes, winding through mountain roads that showcased the stunning Montana landscape. James drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console where my hand could reach it. I traced patterns on his weathered knuckles, marveling at how comfortable this felt. The town was small, one main street with essential shops, a diner, a feed store, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. As we parked, I felt James tense slightly. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just small town politics. Some folks here aren't exactly progressive." I squeezed his hand. "We don't have to." "No," his voice was firm. "I'm not hiding anymore, not even here." We walked into the feed store side by side, not touching but not deliberately distant either. The man behind the counter, weathered, maybe 60, looked up and his expression shifted when he saw James. "Holloway," he said neutrally. "Frank, need to put in an order." The transaction was professional but cold. I noticed other customers glancing our way, some curious, some disapproving. James kept his head high, his voice steady, refusing to shrink. When we left, I could feel his tension. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that," I said once we were in the truck. "Not your fault, and honestly, it's gotten better. When I first came out, I thought the entire town would turn on me. Most people, they don't care as much as I feared. Some do, obviously, but I've got real friends too, people who stood by me." "Still, it can't be easy." "No," he admitted, "but it's easier than lying." We stopped at the diner for lunch, and here the reception was warmer. The owner, a woman named Charlene with kind eyes and gray hair in a messy bun, greeted James with a genuine smile. "James, good to see you, and who's this handsome young man?" "Danny Torres, he's house-sitting while Mason's away." "Well, any friend of Mason's is welcome here," she winked at me, "and anyone who can make James smile like that is extra welcome." Over burgers and fries, Charlene chatted with us about town gossip, never once making me feel uncomfortable or asking invasive questions. When we left, James was noticeably more relaxed. "See," I said, "good people." "Yeah," he agreed, "there are. I forget that sometimes." On the drive back, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Does Mason know about us? James's hands tightened on the wheel. No, I wasn't sure there was an us to tell him about. Is there? "Danny," he pulled over to the side of the road, putting the truck in park so he could look at me fully. "I don't want to define this as something it's not. You're leaving in 6 days. I don't expect promises or commitments, but if you're asking whether this matters to me, whether you matter to me, the answer is yes, more than I probably should let it." "It matters to me too," I said, "and that terrifies me." "Because of the timing." "Because I don't know how to walk away from you, but I don't know how to stay either." James reached over, cupping my face in his hand. "We've got 6 more days, let's not waste them worrying about day 7, let's just be present here, now, together." I leaned into his touch. "Okay." He kissed me there on the side of the mountain road, with the whole vast world spread out around us. That evening, a summer storm rolled in with dramatic suddenness. One moment the sky was clear, the next, dark clouds swallowed the horizon and thunder rumbled through the valley. We barely made it back to the ranch before the rain started, huge, heavy drops that turned into a downpour within seconds. James pulled into the barn to unload supplies while I made a run for the house, laughing as I got soaked in the 30-foot dash. By the time James joined me, we were both drenched. He stood in the doorway, water dripping from his hair, his shirt plastered to his chest, and I felt my mouth go dry for reasons having nothing to do with exertion. "Gonna be a wild one," he said, nodding toward the windows where lightning was now flashing. "I love storms." "Me too." He was looking at me with an intensity that had nothing to do with the weather. We should have changed into dry clothes, should have maintained some semblance of propriety. Instead, I crossed the room and kissed him, and he responded immediately, pulling me against him with a hunger we'd been carefully keeping in check. "Danny," he murmured against my lips, "we should." "Should what? Stop, slow down." "Yeah. Do you want to?" His answer was a growl low in his throat as he kissed me harder. We stumbled toward the stairs, stripping off wet clothes as we went, leaving a trail of denim and cotton. By the time we reached James's bedroom, we were down to basics, skin flushed, breathing ragged. James pulled back, his hands on my shoulders, his eyes searching mine. I need you to be sure, he said, because if we do this, I don't know if I can let you go. I'm sure I've been sure since that first night. This isn't just physical for me. It's not just physical for me either. Outside, thunder crashed, rattling the windows. Lightning illuminated the room in stark, beautiful flashes. I'm not good at romance, James said quietly. I don't know all the right words or moves. I've only been with one person my entire life and that was never truly honest. So I might not know exactly what I'm doing, but I know how I feel. And I feel like I could fall in love with you, Danny Torres, maybe already am falling, and that scares the hell out of me. My eyes stung with tears I refused to let fall. You think you're not good at romance, James? That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I just want you to know what this means to me, that it's not casual, that you're not casual. I pulled him close, pressing my forehead to his. You're not casual to me either, not even a little bit. What happened next was tender and passionate, urgent and gentle, everything I'd ever wanted and didn't know I needed. James touched me like I was precious, like he was memorizing every inch of my skin. And I learned his body in turn, the scars from ranch work, the strength in his muscles, the sensitive spots that made him gasp my name. We took our time, savoring every moment, every sensation. The storm raged outside, but inside James's bed, wrapped in his arms, I felt safe, anchored, found. Afterward, we lay tangled together, skin still tingling, hearts gradually slowing. James traced lazy patterns on my back, and I pressed my face into the curve of his neck, breathing in his scent. Stay tonight, he murmured, don't go back to your room. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. We talked quietly as the storm continued, sharing secrets and fears and hopes. James told me about his marriage, about the loneliness of living a lie, about the relief and terror of finally being honest, about his worries that he was too old, too damaged, too inexperienced in real relationships to ever find genuine love. I told him about my own fears, that I'd wasted my 20s chasing the wrong things, that I'd never figure out what I was meant to do, that I was fundamentally unlovable in some way I couldn't see. You're not unlovable, James said fiercely. You're extraordinary, creative and kind and brave. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life. Even a cowboy who claims he's too old and damaged. Especially him. I kissed him slowly. For the record, you're not too old or too damaged, you're honest and strong and beautiful, and the fact that you're just figuring this all out doesn't make you less than, it makes you human. When did you get so wise? About 30 seconds ago. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into mine. Then more seriously, what are we going to do, Danny, when your time here is up? It was the question we'd been avoiding. I didn't have a good answer. I don't know, I admitted. I have to go back to Denver. I have an apartment, job applications pending, a life there, and you have the ranch, your work, Mason. I know. But I don't want this to end. Neither do I. We fell silent, the impossibility of our situation settling over us like a weight. A long-distance relationship between a 24-year-old figuring out his life and a 52-year-old cowboy with a ranch to run, it seemed ridiculous, impractical, doomed from the start. And yet, let's not decide anything tonight, James said finally. Let's just have this, have each other, and trust that we'll figure out the rest when we need to. Okay. I wanted to argue, to make plans, to solve the unsolvable, but James was right. Tonight we had this. Tomorrow would come whether we worried about it or not. So I let myself sink into his embrace, let myself be present in this moment, in this bed, with this man who'd somehow become essential to me in less than a week. The next morning, tangled in James's sheets with sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt happier than I could remember being in years. James was still asleep beside me, his face peaceful, one arm thrown over my waist. I watched him for a long moment, committing this to memory, the way his chest rose and fell, the silver in his stubble, the small smile on his lips even in sleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mason's name flashed on the screen. Guilt flooded through me. Mason, my friend, James's son, the reason I was here in the first place. I carefully extracted myself from James's embrace and grabbed my phone, padding naked to the bathroom to answer. Hey Mason. Danny, how's ranch life treating you? Are you dying of boredom yet? Actually no, it's been great, really great. Good, I was worried you'd hate it. Listen, I've got some news. The Seattle thing is going better than expected and they've offered me a position. I'm thinking of taking it, which means I'll be here longer than planned. That's amazing, Mason. Congratulations. Thanks. Anyway, I wanted to let you know you can stay at the ranch as long as you want. Dad texted me that he came home early, but he said you're welcome to stay regardless. You two getting along okay? My stomach twisted. Yeah, we're getting along fine. Good, he needs the company, honestly. He's been pretty isolated since he came out. Not a lot of dating prospects for gay cowboys in rural Montana, you know. Yeah, I can imagine. Anyway, I should go. Team meeting in 5. Take care of yourself, Danny, and thanks again for watching the place. After we hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor, head in my hands. Mason's voice had been so cheerful, so trusting. And here I was, sleeping with his father, falling for his father, complicating everything. What the hell were we doing? A knock on the bathroom door. Danny, you okay? I opened the door to find James standing there, wearing only his jeans, concern etched on his face. Mason called, I said. Understanding dawned. Ah. He's staying in Seattle longer, offered me the extended ranch stay. That's good news, isn't it? Is it? James were lying to him, by omission but still. James ran a hand through his hair. You're right, we need to tell him. What do we even tell him that we've been, what, dating, having a fling? I don't even know what to call this. Does it need a label? For his sake, probably. James stepped closer, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. Then we tell him the truth, that I've developed feelings for you, that we're seeing where this goes, that it's not casual or thoughtless, and that we both respect him too much to keep it secret. What if he's angry? Then he's angry and we deal with it. James's voice was steady, but Mason's a good man, he'll understand. You sound more confident than I feel. I'm terrified, but I'm more afraid of losing you because we weren't brave enough to be honest. I kissed him, trying to pour all my tangled emotions into it. When we broke apart, I nodded. Okay, we tell him, but in person he deserves that. Agreed. That afternoon, James called Mason. I listened from the kitchen, my stomach in knots, as he asked his son to come home for a visit soon, that there was something important to discuss. Mason, curious but unconcerned, agreed to drive down the following weekend. 4 days, we had 4 more days before everything changed. The days before Mason's arrival took on a bittersweet quality. James and I both knew we were existing in a bubble, fragile, temporary, precious. We didn't talk about it explicitly, but it colored everything we did. We made the most of our time. James taught me to ride, putting me on a gentle mare named Daisy and laughing affectionately at my terrible form. We took long rides through the property, James pointing out landmarks and sharing stories from his years on the land. My grandfather built this ranch from nothing, he said one afternoon as we rested near a creek. Worked himself to the bone so his kids would have something. My dad expanded it, made it profitable, and now it's mine to maintain. That's a lot of legacy. Sometimes it feels like a chain, James admitted. Like I have to stay here, keep doing this because it's what's expected, because it's what Holloways do. But you love it. I do, most days. Other days, he looked at me, other days I wonder what life might look like if I made different choices. Like what? Like selling the ranch, moving somewhere more accepting, starting over. He shook his head. But that's fantasy. This land is in my blood. I can't imagine leaving it. The unspoken words hung between us, and I can't imagine asking you to stay. We cooked together, making increasingly elaborate meals as if the act of nourishing each other could sustain us through what was coming. We watched old movies on the couch, James's arm around me, my head on his shoulder. We made love in the quiet hours of the night, desperate and tender and achingly present. And we talked. God, we talked about everything. Politics and philosophy, childhood memories and future dreams, the big questions and the small daily observations. I learned that James thought in poetry but spoke in pragmatism, that he was more idealistic than he let on, that beneath the tough cowboy exterior was a man who felt things deeply and carried wounds he'd never fully acknowledged. I spent 30 years not knowing who I was, he told me one night, or knowing but being too afraid to admit it. I got married at 22 because that's what was expected, because I thought I could make it work if I just tried hard enough. And I loved my wife in a way. but it was the love you have for a good friend, not the love you're supposed to have for the person you build a life with. Did she know? I don't think so, maybe suspected, we never talked about it. His voice was heavy with regret. When she got sick, I took care of her, and I'd do it again, but after she died, when I finally let myself feel what I'd been suppressing, the relief was overwhelming, and the guilt over that relief nearly destroyed me. I held him as he spoke, offering comfort and understanding. You did your best with what you knew at the time, that's all anyone can do. Doesn't make it hurt less. No, but it makes you human, and it makes us even more meaningful, because you know what it's like to live a lie and you're choosing honesty now. He kissed my forehead. You make it sound noble, I just feel like I'm stumbling through the dark. Then we'll stumble together. On the 9th day, the day before Mason was due to arrive, James and I drove up to a high meadow he'd mentioned. It was a place he came when he needed to think, away from the ranch and the weight of expectations. The meadow was breathtaking, wildflowers in every color, mountains rising on all sides, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. We spread a blanket and lay in the grass, fingers intertwined, watching clouds drift past. I don't want this to end, I said quietly. Me neither. But I don't see how it can continue. Long-distance relationships are hard enough without all our complications. I know. We were quiet for a long time, then James rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. What if you stayed? My heart stuttered, what? Not permanently, not necessarily, but what if you stayed longer than 2 weeks, gave us a real chance, saw if it's just vacation romance or something more? James, I can't just stay indefinitely, I have to figure out my career, my life. You could figure it out here, you've got your laptop, you could freelance, right? Do whatever creative work you've been dreaming about. The ranch has Wi-Fi, we're not that remote. And what would I tell people? I'm shacking up with my college friend's father in Montana. You'd be house-sitting, helping out, finding yourself. He cupped my face. Look, I know it's crazy, I know it's asking a lot, but Danny, I'm falling in love with you, already more than halfway there, and I don't want to lose you because we didn't even try. Tears pricked my eyes. You're falling in love with me. Didn't I make that obvious? I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered. Have been since that first kiss, probably. Then stay, please, even just for another month. Let's see where this goes when it's not a countdown clock hanging over us. I wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt, but fear held me back. Fear of upending my life for something uncertain, fear of failing at yet another thing, fear of getting hurt when it inevitably didn't work out. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, James kissed me softly. Just know that I mean it. I want you here, want to see if we can make this work, and I'm willing to put in the effort if you are. That night I lay awake long after James fell asleep, wrestling with the biggest decision of my life. Mason arrived at noon, his familiar Honda pulling up the driveway with music blaring. I watched from the window as James went out to greet him, their hug warm and easy. Father and son, a bond built over years of shared life. I'd been nervous all morning, barely able to eat breakfast. James had been calmer, or at least better at hiding his anxiety. Hey Danny, Mason called as he came inside, giving me a quick hug. Good to see you, man, ranch treating you well. Really well, your dad's been a great host. Mason grinned, looking between us. I'm glad you two are getting along. I was a little worried it might be awkward. Not awkward at all, James said, and I had to admire his composure. Actually, that's part of what we need to talk to you about. Mason's smile faded slightly. That sounds serious. Everything okay? Everything's fine, better than fine actually, but there's something we need to tell you and it's complicated. We moved to the living room, Mason looking increasingly concerned. I felt like I might throw up. James sat beside me on the couch, close but not touching, while Mason took the armchair opposite. Okay, you're freaking me out a little, Mason said. What's going on? James took a breath. Danny and I have gotten close over the past week and a half, very close. We've developed feelings for each other and we've been seeing each other, romantically. The silence that followed felt endless. Mason's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something I couldn't quite identify. He looked at me, then at his father, then back at me. You're dadding, he said slowly. You and my dad. Yes, I managed. Since when? About a week, James said. Since I got home early, it wasn't planned, Mason, it just happened. It just happened, Mason repeated. He rubbed his face with his hands. Okay, give me a second to process this. We waited, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could both hear it. James's hand found mine, squeezing gently, and I held on like a lifeline. Finally, Mason looked up. Are you serious about this? It's not just some fling or whatever. It's serious, James said firmly. At least it is for me, very serious. Me too, I added. Mason studied us both for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he started laughing. Not cruel laughter, more like the surprised laughter of someone who just had their entire worldview shifted. I'm sorry, he said, waving a hand. I'm not laughing at you, it's just… Danny, I invited you here to help you clear your head and figure out your life. I didn't expect you'd figure it out by falling for my dad. I didn't expect it either, I said. Dad, you've been telling me for 2 years that you're too old and too set in your ways to date. And here you are, dadding my friend. Life's funny that way, James said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Mason shook his head, still looking bemused. I need you both to understand something. Dad, when you came out, you told me that all you wanted was to find someone who made you happy. Someone who saw you for who you really are and didn't ask you to hide. I remembered. And Danny, you've been one of my best friends since sophomore year. I know you're kind and honest and one of the most genuinely good people I've ever met. I didn't know where he was going with this. Mason leaned forward, his expression serious now. So here's what I think. If you two make each other happy, if this is real and not just some vacation romance, then I'm okay with it. More than okay, I'm happy for you. Relief flooded through me so powerfully, I nearly burst into tears. Really? James asked, his voice rough with emotion. Really, I mean, it's weird, it's definitely weird, but life is short and happiness is hard to find. If you found it with each other, he shrugged. Who am I to stand in the way? James stood and crossed to his son, pulling him into a tight hug. Thank you, you don't know what this means. I think I do, Mason hugged him back, then looked at me over his father's shoulder. But Danny, if you hurt him, friend or not, I'll kick your ass. Fair, I said, smiling through the tears now sliding down my face. And Dad, same goes, Danny's my friend, you treat him right. I intend to. When they broke apart, Mason flopped back into his chair. So, are you going back to Denver, Danny? Is this a long-distance thing? We haven't decided yet, I admitted. Dad asked me to stay longer, I clarified, and I'm thinking about it. Mason's eyebrows rose. Stay here on the ranch. If Danny wants to, James said. I know it's a big ask. It's not a big ask, Mason interrupted. It's a great idea, actually. Danny, you said you wanted to figure out what comes next for you career-wise. Why not do that here? You can freelance, write, whatever, and you'd have Dad to keep you company. Seems like a win-win. You make it sound simple. Isn't it, unless there's something stopping you? I looked at James, who was watching me with hope and fear mingled in his expression. Then I thought about Denver, the apartment that never felt like home, the jobs I'd applied for without enthusiasm, the vague future I couldn't quite imagine. And I thought about the past week and a half, waking up to mountain views, the satisfaction of physical work, conversations that fed my soul, James's arms around me, his voice in the darkness, the way he looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. What was stopping me? Fear, just fear. Nothing's stopping me, I said quietly. James's expression transformed. Danny. I want to stay for a while at least, see where this goes if the offer still stands. It stands, God, it stands. James looked like he wanted to kiss me but was holding back because of Mason. Oh, for heaven's sake, Mason said, rolling his eyes. You can kiss in front of me, I'm not 12. So James kissed me right there in the living room with his son watching and the future suddenly full of possibility instead of endings. The next few weeks were an adjustment. I moved my things into James's room officially, no more pretending we were just sharing a house. I called my landlord in Denver and gave notice on my apartment. My friends thought I was crazy, moving to rural Montana for a guy I'd known less than a month, but I felt more certain about this than I'd felt about anything in years. Mason stayed for the weekend and we fell into an easy rhythm, the three of us cooking together, working around the ranch, talking late into the night. It was surprisingly comfortable. Mason made jokes about his dad's romantic side, James pretended to be annoyed, and I marveled at how quickly this had become normal. Before he left for Seattle, Mason pulled me aside. "I meant what I said," he told me. "I'm happy for you both, but Danny, be patient with him. He's still figuring this out, the being out thing, the dating thing, all of it. He might stumble sometimes." "I know, I'm figuring things out too." "Yeah, but you've been out since college, you've dated. He's basically a teenager when it comes to relationships." "A teenage cowboy," I said, smiling. "Exactly, a teenage cowboy with abandonment issues and a tendency to hide his feelings behind stoicism." Yeah. "I'll be patient. And take care of yourself too. Don't lose yourself in this, okay? You came here to figure out your life, and that's still important." "I won't forget." After Mason left, James and I settled into our new reality. I set up a workspace in the spare bedroom and started taking on freelance writing projects, travel pieces, blog content, the occasional marketing consultation. It wasn't my dream yet, but it paid the bills and gave me flexibility. In the evenings, I'd work on my own writing. The novel I'd been thinking about for years started to take shape. James would read my drafts, offering surprising insights and unwavering encouragement. "You're really talented," he said one night, looking up from my latest chapter. "This is good, Danny, really good." "You're biased." "I'm honest, there's a difference." We had our challenges, of course. James struggled sometimes with being openly affectionate, decades of hiding not easily unlearned. I had moments of panic, wondering if I'd made a massive mistake, if I was running away from problems rather than toward solutions. But we talked through it, we were honest with each other even when it was hard, and slowly, day by day, we built something real. 3 months into my extended stay, autumn arrived in Montana with breathtaking beauty. The mountains turned gold and red, the air grew crisp, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd been this happy. I was making real progress on my novel, I'd built up a steady freelance client base, and James was everything. We'd fallen into the kind of partnership I'd never experienced before. We worked together, cooked together, explored the land together. We had inside jokes and comfortable silences. We knew each other's routines and rhythms, and the physical attraction, far from fading, had only deepened with emotional intimacy. But we still hadn't talked long-term. I was technically still just staying for a while. At some point, I'd have to decide, was this my life now, or was I just delaying the inevitable? The decision point came unexpectedly. A marketing firm in Denver called with a job offer, a good one with the title and salary I'd once dreamed of. They wanted an answer within a week. I stared at the email, feeling torn. This was what I'd worked toward for years: security, career advancement, a return to the life I'd known. But I didn't want it, not anymore. That evening, I showed James the email. He read it carefully, his expression neutral. "This is a great opportunity," he said finally. "It is. You should take it." I blinked, surprised and hurt. "You want me to leave?" "No." His voice was rough. "God, no, but Danny, I can't ask you to give up your career for me for this. You're 24, you have your whole life ahead of you. I won't be the reason you have regrets." "You wouldn't be, James? I don't want that job. I don't want to go back to Denver and push products and climb corporate ladders. I want to write, I want to create, and I want to do it here with you." "You say that now." "I say that because it's true." I grabbed his hands. "Look, I know this is fast, I know it's unconventional, but I've never been happier than I am right now, never felt more like myself. And yes, part of that is you, but part of it is also this life, the quiet, the space to think, the work that matters. What if you change your mind?" "What if I don't, James? I'm not some kid infatuated with the idea of a rugged cowboy. I'm an adult who knows what he wants, and I want this, want you, want us." He searched my face. "You're sure?" "I'm sure, are you?" "I've been sure since about day 3, he admitted, but I didn't want to be selfish. It's not selfish to want someone to stay, it's not selfish to build a life together." James pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. "I love you, Danny Torres. I should have said it sooner, but I was scared." "I love you too, and I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing us." That night, I declined the job offer. And the next morning, I started looking at how to officially change my address, transfer my driver's license, make Montana not just a temporary stop but home. The holidays arrived. Mason came home for Thanksgiving, bringing a new girlfriend who was delightfully unfazed by his father's relationship. We cooked a massive meal together, laughing and telling stories, and I felt the warmth of chosen family wrap around me. Christmas was quieter, just James and me. We exchanged simple gifts. I gave him a leather-bound journal for his poetry. He gave me a beautiful handmade desk for my writing space. But the real gift was the conversation we had by the fire. "I want you to move in officially," James said. "Not as a guest, not as someone staying for a while, as my partner, as someone building a life here. I already feel like I live here." "I know, but I want it to be real. Want you to know this is your home as much as it's mine." "What about the ranch, your legacy?" "The ranch will be here, but legacies are about more than land and bloodlines. They're about the life you live, the love you create, the authenticity you bring to your days." He took my hand. "You're part of my legacy now, Danny, and I'm grateful for it." I kissed him, tasting salt from tears I didn't remember shedding. "I'm grateful too." As winter deepened, I finished the first draft of my novel. It was rough, imperfect, but it existed, a tangible representation of dreams finally pursued. James read it cover to cover, making notes, asking questions, celebrating with me when I typed the end. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you, this place, the support. You would have, maybe not this book but something. You're too talented not to create. Still, thank you for believing in me, for giving me space to figure things out. Thank you for staying, for choosing this crazy life with a cowboy who's still learning how to be himself." Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch. Foals were born, flowers bloomed, and James taught me more about the rhythms of the land. I was no expert, but I could handle basic tasks now, could ride without embarrassing myself, could understand the language of animals and seasons. We talked about the future with increasing specificity, maybe adding a small guest house for when Mason visited, maybe expanding my freelance work into a full writing career, maybe, someday, making our partnership legal and official. "Would you want that?" James asked one evening as we watched the sunset. "Marriage. With you eventually, yes. Even though I'm old enough to be your father. Even though, besides, you're not that old, just experienced." He laughed. "Experienced, that's diplomatic." "It's true, and James, age doesn't matter, not to me. What matters is that we love each other, that we're building something real, that we're both becoming better versions of ourselves together." "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from a cowboy." I'm writing this epilogue from the porch of what we now call our ranch. The Holloway Ranch is still its official name, but it's become ours in the year since I officially moved in. My novel sold to a publisher. It'll be out next spring, and while I'm nervous about putting my words into the world, I'm also excited. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough to invest in the ranch, to help with renovations, to feel like a true partner in this life we're building. Mason visits regularly, often bringing his girlfriend, now fiancée, Sarah. They're talking about moving back to Montana eventually, raising their future kids near the ranch. The idea of James being a grandfather, of me being some kind of uncle figure, fills me with unexpected joy. The town has mostly accepted us. There are still some who won't look James in the eye, some who whisper when we go to the diner together. But Charlene always has a smile for us, and we've made genuine friends, other ranchers, artists who have escaped to the mountains, people who understand that love is love is love. James is more himself than I've ever seen him. He laughs more, worries less, moves through the world with a confidence that comes from authenticity. He started sharing his poetry, submitting to small journals, finding community online with other late-blooming queer artists. "Never thought I'd be here," he told me last night as we lay in bed. 53 years old, with a partner I adore, doing work I love, finally living honestly, feels like a miracle. It's not a miracle, it's choice. Your choice to come out, my choice to stay, our choice to build this together. Best choice I ever made. Me too. As I close this story, both the literal writing of it and the chapter of uncertainty that preceded it, I'm struck by how much can change in a year. How a spontaneous trip to house sit can become a complete life transformation. How a connection that seemed impossible can become the foundation of everything. I don't know what comes next. More books, probably, maybe some challenges as we navigate what it means to be in an age gap relationship in a conservative area, maybe adventures we haven't even imagined yet. But I know we'll face it together, James and me, the cowboy who learned to live authentically and the city boy who found his home in the mountains. This isn't the ending I expected when I drove up that gravel driveway 13 months ago. It's better, it's real, it's ours. And that's more than enough.